The home of my parents in Tregwendra in Mullion, and I'm lucky this morning to be sitting here with Mr. Stanley Tonkin, one of Mullion's oldest residents. He's 87. It's the 27th of October 1996, and I'm looking forward to Stanley Tonkin telling me some things about old Mullion and his memories of those times. So over to you.
Now, in 1918, in Mullion, there was 160 dwelling houses and cottages. Today, there's nearly 900. Now, if you took a walk from the village clock to Mullion Cove, on the left-hand side going down into Mullion Cove, there would be 6 dwellings. And on the right-hand side, there would be 4, right down to the cove. In the cove itself, there was just one dwelling, a wood bungalow, which later on, many years later, became a tea room. Now, the same applies to the Poldhu Road. From the old inn to Poldhu Beach, on the right-hand side, there was not one building. And on the left-hand side, there was 4, excluding Angroves Lane. From the top of the village to Penale, there were 6 houses all the way up to Penale. Some on one side, some on another. Down at the valley at Troon, that was the thickest population now. There was 14 down there, and there's a few more now. Anyhow, and Pelorman Lane was just the 3 farms, Pelorman, Newton and Prisk. No houses at all. So you see, Mullion's grown.
Yes, indeed.
Enormously. Anyhow, farms, there was 30 farms and small holdings. Today there's 17. Now, come to worship in the Mullion. There was the parish church, the Methodist church, the little Wesleyan chapel, now a do-it-yourself store, and that was a beautiful little chapel. It was lovely. And then, of course, the Roman Catholics came here, and they had a marquee to start with. And for some unknown reason, that got burnt down, and they decided to build what they've got today. Anyhow, schools. The first school in Mullion, known school, is where the off license is now. That, when I was a boy, was a housing for carriages and jingles and landaus, wagonettes, etc. And where the chemist's shop is, that was one of the playgrounds. And the other playground was at the back, which was the wash shed for the cars. So the next school came down on Lancemelon Road here. And that's where I, as a boy, went. Anyhow, of course, that eventually closed and we've got the new ones now. Now, shops. At the top of the village, on the corner of the Penhale-Troon Road, there's a house called Domain, which old Mr. John Rule lived in. And he grew all his own vegetables. Never bought a vegetable. He had an enormous garden, and he had some apple trees there and a couple of medlar trees. And every season, when the time came, he picked the medlars, picked the apples, sold them from his shop, but his vegetables was always fresh. Of course, you didn't go there to get oranges or bananas. Those things were never thought of in his day. Anyhow, the next shop is Mr. Sam Matthews' shop, which sold everything. It had 2 counters. On the right was the one where the ladies could get their cottons, threads, ribbons, stockings, whatever they wanted. And on the left, of course, was the grocery shop. If you went in for currants, sultanas, sugar, it all had to be weighed up in blue bags. Nothing packed. There was no tin stuff then at all. The bacon was cut by hand, and bread, of course, was there. And outside was the big paraffin tank, which, of course, there was no electricity. It was all paraffin lights. Anyhow, that was the big shop. And then he had a small one down, a little way down, for all the hardware. Baths, scrubbing brushes, brooms, whatever. And girls' hoops, I remember them hanging up there. And then the butcher shop. And that was by a man called Hendy, Robert Hendy. And you entered the shop from the road in the centre. And of course there was the big chopping block there. No fridges, of course. But you would see a quarter, sometimes a half of a bullock hanging up there. And if you wanted meat, he would go and cut it off, saw it, and add your meat that way. Same for pigs and sheep. They were hanging up there inside. Then the next shop was a small one on the right-hand side, next to the cobbler shop. People called Sanders had it. And it was a little newsagent shop. I used to go there and get my comic ups. But when you walked into the shop, if 3 people walked into it, it was full because it was only a passageway in. On the opposite side, there was a little small shop which sold little things, what we would term today a corner shop. They sold a little of this and a little of that. And then, of course, the next shop was George's shop, known as supply stores. But when I was a boy, it was never known as that. It was always called Big Shop. If you were sent down to that shop, your mother would say, go down Big Shop and get what you want. Anyhow, they sold more, because that was the most up-to-date shop, and it sold almost everything. There was no chemist, but you could get Beecham's pills, you could get this and that, aspirins and all sorts of things. And they were all in glass cases on the side of the counter. And that was the first shop to have electric light, but they had their own plant. Now, that's the end of the shops in Mullion.
Yes.
Until they moved the post office.
Yes.
And Mr. Sam Matthews owned the ground where the post office is now, and he had that one built. And the old post office, he sold that to a man called Sam George, known as Sam Martle.
Why was that?
And he had a bit of green groceries, potatoes, tea, sugar and things like that. And he had a 4-wheel cart and went out selling around to the houses. But he was always known as Sam Martle. And people often wonder why he was called Sam Martle. And the fact was that when he was a boy, he fell off a donkey and had a nasty fall. And one of the ladies that picked him up, the old women of the place, instead of saying poor mortal, poor martel, in real Cornish style, and it stuck to it. Anyhow, that was the other odd shop. Pubs, there was 2 at one time. The Old Inn, which I can remember the date up on it being 1699, but it was before that, much before that, which I'll prove to you presently. The other one was the one which was in the centre of the village, was known as the King's Arms, later George's Hotel, and then eventually Temperance Hotel. So, anyhow, that was that. Hotels, 3. Mullion Cove Hotel, Mullion Hotel, of course the old one burnt down, and the Paul Dew Hotel. Paul Dew Hotel, of course, is now a nursing home. Anyhow, now to the post office, the old one. The used to be a fellow called Williams who farmed up in a small holding at Beaver, and he would go every day with his pony and trap, which was painted red, the trap was, to Penale, and met the bus and brought the post back and opened down the back, put it in, closed it up. Rain didn't affect him. Anyhow, the post was delivered on foot, no bikes, and the postman had a flower pot hat that time. Anyhow, that was the post office. And then there was one other shop of the type, not sold to the public in the village. It was a Serpentine shop, owned by a man called Johnny Casley. And that is where Gordon Champion's paper shop used to be, now a fancy shop. And Johnny Casley would be there all the winter making Serpentine. And in the summer, with his donkey trap, he'd drive down to the cove and he had a shop down there. And that's where he sold his things. Now, of course, there was, of course, the workshop of Mr. James Henry Matthews, who was carpenter and builder. He built an enormous lot of houses in Mullion. He was the builder of them. And he had that yard, which was 2 stories. And you see men up there working at night time, sometimes making a coffin under lamp lights. Anyhow, now of course it's changed to a greengrocery. And the other carpenter was Joseph Rule. Anyhow, now the cobbler shop was where my grandfather was the village cobbler, and it's now Busy Bee. Anyhow, that was known as the House of Commons, and winter time especially, the old men would always congregate up there, sit around on forms or on the leather that was there. My grandfather would be working, trimming this, whatever he was doing, and throwing the bits of leather onto the fire. Of course, you can imagine the smoke and the smell. Anyhow, these old men, they would put the world to right. They would argue on this and argue on that. But when it came to a political time, election on, the air was livid. It was terrible. They would fall out. Anyhow, one particular time, it was an election. And older boys than myself, my brother, Mac George, Sammy George and others, they played a trick on me, old men. They barred the catch, which was a thumb catch, with a piece of wood. And Mac George got some pepper from his mother's shop, poured it down the chimney pot, and put a wet sack over the top, took the steps away and walked off, and left them there. And they were in there for about 20 minutes, cough, 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 until one of the late arrivals came and then let them in, or let them out, and let himself in. Anyhow, that was one of the tricks they did. In those days, there was no vandalism, roguery. Now, Sam Martle, his little four-wheel cart, he kept down in Tremini Farm. And these same boys pulled it out one night, went down the road, into the field where the British Telecom Exchange is. And of course that was High Bank. Down there was the pool. And they ran the cart right into the middle of the pool and left it. Which meant Sam Martle had to go into his cart up to his knees. Anyhow, so those are the sort of things that happen. But now let's get to Mullion Cove a minute. I can't remember the harbour being built. The harbour being built was long before my time. But I can remember things that happened down there. Now, one year we had rain, heavy rain, for nearly a fortnight, continuous. And the left-hand side of the cove was just like a waterfall coming down the whole width of the grass that you could see now. And of course that meant that rivers were swollen. And the river down through Trimbell, Trenance, of course, was enormous. And it goes under the road and comes out down halfway down in the Cove Harbour. And with the wind and the rain, branches of trees and things washed down. When it come to get under the road, it blocked it. And of course, water, the pressure did, something had to give, and it was the road. And it broke it up for about 25 yards to where it went into the viaduct down to the harbour. Anyhow, it causes a lot of trouble, you know, and eventually they got it right, but they made an outlet there now. There's one there now. So that if that happens, the water can run out. That was one thing. Now, in the old days, there was always two boats up on the split, and they were fixed to an old rusty hand winch by the winch house there. And they were tarred black, and they're quite big, and in them were seine nets in each one, covered with tarpaulin, and the oars, of course, were in there as well. And then when the pilchard season came along, someone would always be up on the cliff watching. And I can remember the last pilchard season. Of course, when they watch, the man, if he sees a shoal of pilchard, shouts, "Heather." That's a Cornish word, heather, meaning pilchards. And I can remember running from Britannic side, till he looked over and he shouted "Heather" 2 or 3 times. And all the fishermen dropped what they were doing, lots of boats, went out, and brought in the pilchards. And the man that did that was called Edward George, known as Meddy Crab. Grandfather to Edward George up here now, his grandfather.
Yes.
That was the last ever.
When would that have been? What year?
Oh, I would be about 10 years of age. I'd be 70 odd years ago. Yes. Anyhow, the other thing was that we did have a bad storm here. Winter time. Anyhow, they pull the boats right up. They always do. They pull them up alongside the road, because in those days they could pull them up right by the lifeboat house, because that was still a lifeboat house. And they pull them in, but of course someone had to be nearest to the harbour. And Tommy Downing, an uncle of mine, his was the nearest. And the enormous sea running. Anyhow, one huge wave come and took his boat. And took it completely over the harbour wall, smashed it down in by the ear rock, and it was smashed in smithereens. Of course, I didn't see it. Other people saw it that were down there, but that's what happened in those days. Well, now, there was, as I said earlier, there was only one dwelling in the wood bungalow, but there were 7 cellars. And next to the modern bungalow that is there now, there was an enormous cellar, double top and bottom, full width, which is now 3 flats. And the fishermen used to keep their nets up there. And the 2 were the buildings which Pat Downing lives in, and the other one is now a cafe. They were cellars. Stone steps going up, an iron rail, handrail, rough, but that didn't matter. And during the war, First World War, in 1915 or 16, the middle of the war anyhow, August month, a troop of Sea Scouts came down for a holiday. Of course, came to the sea so that they could enjoy it. And they were let one of the cellars, the bottom one. And while they were there, one of them knocked an oil stove over and burnt both cellars to a shell. Now, they were never rebuilt. Why, I don't know. I suppose the owner, which could have been Lord Falmouth or Lord Robarts, decided to sell the site, and he sold, and the two houses are built there as they are now today. Of course, the lifeboat house was kept on. No lifeboat there, but the Coast Guards looked after it, and they kept it beautiful. Well, then Mears bought that, and he bought the long cellar which belonged to the Gilberts, which is now the garden.
Yes.
And in exchange for that, he built a wood black cellar down on the harbour over
Yes, I know.
in place of that. So anyhow, that was the cottage, that was the cellars, and of course down at Mullion Cove a lot of filming has been done. Modernly Cock Gable, but when I was a young lad of 14, there were silent films,
Yes.
and they were filming down there at night. A film by the name of the Pearl of the Sea Fishers, something like that, and Guy Newell and Ivy Duke were the two main people there in those days. Well, now let's move from the Cove to Mill Farm. That's where all the farmers took all their corn to be ground. They go down with their horse and wagons, all the sacks, and it was driven by a water wheel, Trinance River, and it came down into a big pool, which is known as Middle Pool, on which Williams, the farmer, if he wanted to build up the thing, he would drop the thing by a handle, and the pool would build up, and then it would slowly overflow if it didn't want to. And when he wanted to open it, it just went up and open it. That would drive the wheel right down under the road onto a wood viaduct onto the wheel. The wheel is still there. Anyhow, so but now, of course, there's nothing done at all. In latter years, the last 10, 15 years, they used to grind by tractor with a belt and drove down there. That was all there was there. Now, we come now to smuggling days. Now, smuggling in Cornwall, of course, was very rare. And there's nothing for them to take a donkey up on the cliff and have a ladder hanging on. Walk the donkey up, turn the donkey around, put the lap on the other side, and walk him back. Now, a boat out there would think he was all right, and he would come in. Of course, he was on the rocks. Now, I suppose they use violence at times. And other times they probably, if it was dark night blowing, they would wait till daylight and pick what they could then. Anyhow, that's what they used to do. And the last known smuggler in West Cornwall was my great-grandfather, known as Bobo George. There's a photograph of him I was in Helston Museum. Anyhow, of course, they had to be careful. Customs was about. And I heard my mother tell the story many times, that her grandmother was bathing the baby in the kitchen. Of course, there was no bath. Tin bath, bathing the baby, sitting down bathing, and the customs officer came in. I spoke to them, and I don't know what else, whether he asked questions whether he had a cup of tea or not. I don't know. Anyhow, he came and he went. And my great-grandmother, when she was bathing the baby, was sitting on a keg of brandy with a crinoline skirt all over it. So you see, that's what they were up to those days.
Yeah.
Now, when I was a young lad, of course, there was a lot of sailing ships still about. And, of course, steam. And if we had a very strong east wind, a gale force east wind, boats couldn't go up around the Lizard. They used to shelter in here from Mullion Island, perhaps to Portland, no farther. And one year there was 136 boats moored in that area, and they were there for 10 days. And they come in with the boats because the water here was calm.
Yeah.
They came in, go up the shops to buy bread, whatever, tobacco, all that. But of course now, this day, radio, they don't need it. So now, there used to be fish carts coming to Mullion to sell fish, because the fishermen didn't catch enough to sell like that. They came from both left. They were selling pilchards, mackerel, cod, dogfish, anything. No shellfish. There were two brothers, and they hated each other like two cats. And they would come with it and shout pilchards and that. Anyhow,
what was their name? The brother's name?
But they used to sell a lot of fish here. Come here. And then another thing, when I was a boy, after the First World War, there used to be an Italian organ grinder come here. A little short man with a beard. He had a peaked cap. He could speak broken English, and he had an organ, and he had a stick idea, and he would pull it down, and he could rest his organ and grind it. And people loved him. But what they loved most was the monkey that was on it. He had a little live monkey. Everybody loved the monkey because the monkey would hold the cup to take the money. Anyhow, he must have, well, of course he died, I don't know, but he was here for about 4 or 5 years, and then he stopped. And then for a couple of years we had an Italians again, but they had a North-drawn organ, which wasn't the same, and they didn't stay more than 2 years. Now, we had an old character that used to come from Elston called One-Armed George, known as Cuckoo, because he could almost mimic Cuckoo. Anyhow, he used to come once every 3 weeks. And no matter what the time of the season of the year was, he would sing his Christmas, he'd sing carols. Harvest time, he would sing harvest. It didn't matter what it was. But they always singing Cuckoo after he finished singing. Anyhow, so now the Sunday schools, they were really marvellous in those days. They were well attended. And they had their fete day. Now, Whit Monday, the parish church had theirs in the vicarage garden, because the vicarage garden was enormous then. It run right down to this health centre there. And then on the Tuesday, the Methodists had theirs. And they had a band. They used to either have St Denis or Campbell, the best two bands in the county, either one of those, and they would march to Mullion Hotel and have their do on the lawn. And I can remember as a boy, because we were all welcome if we were church or if we didn't go anywhere, but we were always welcome. And I was down there, Mr. Reginald George throwing sweets on the lawn and we scrambling for them. That was the highlight. And then you go back to tea and have your normal saffron bun. But of course, those days, I'm afraid, are gone. Now, another little thing is wells. There was between 40 and 50 wells in Mullion. And now I can recall 25 at least that are closed down. Absolutely closed down. And I doubt to say many of them are being used at all. But you see, the well next door to me was 40 feet deep, beautiful water. And I had to fill it up. And I threw all the rubbish I could get into it. But then that's moving with the times, I suppose. Now, talking about the smugglers bringing boats in, of course other boats got wrecked. And round the coast of Cornwall, as Silly Isles can prove, wrecks were 2 a penny almost. Frequent. And of course if wrecks happened, it meant drownings. And it was nothing unusual to go down on the beach and find a body or bodies washed up. Now, what they did was, if they found a body, they wrapped him in Hessian or sailcloth or whatever they had and brought him up and laid him in the church tower. That was the mortuary from the 15th century, because that was when it was built, the tower. And they laid it there. Well, of course, there had to be an inquest. Well, the coroner came. He held his inquest in the little pub. That's where he held his inquest. He had the information he wanted: cause of death, drowning, body unknown. He then gave orders for burial. They came, whoever it was at that time, took the body out, still wrapped up, no coffins. The parish couldn't afford coffins. They took him out and buried him in the churchyard. Now, there's no marked grave. And if you take note of Mullion churchyard, there's not a lot of tombstones and a lot of open spaces. Well then, in 1913, they closed the churchyard. I can remember it being closed. I can remember the last burial there. And they opened a new cemetery. The reason being that because of the unmarked graves, the sexton was disturbing human bones time and time again. He didn't know where he was digging. And that's why in 1913 they opened the new cemetery. And as I told you earlier, the first person buried there was Mrs. Thomas from the Mullion Hotel. Anyhow, that's of course we've had some personalities down here.
Yeah.
You know, well-known personalities. Yes. More modern, of course. But the first personality that I can remember was Lord Justice Stanley. He was Lord Chief Justice of England, and he was the first Labour Lord Chief.
Right.
Yes, he was a Labour. But a wealthy man, stayed at Mullion Hotel, came down to Mullion 4 or 5 years running. Then he died, and of course... but then we've had sports people here. Bunny Alston, Joyce Weathered, the woman golfer, Roger Weather, her brother, Harold Gimlet, Eddie Painter, of course Bob Wyatt, Fred Titmuss. Those are cricketers that we've had. And we had one well-known England footballer down here on holiday, with George Mayle, who played right back for Arsenal and England. So, you see, we've had personalities here, yes. But of course, a lot of things have died out. We used to have a horse gymkhana here when I was a boy, up in Corroger Fields. Trotting matches, pebble picking on ponies, and jumping and all. They died out, never returned. But anyhow, let me see. I want to make sure I haven't missed anything in particular. Now, of course, Mullion had a band many years ago. I got a photograph, by the way, I must show you.
Right.
Anyhow, they had a band, and the Harris and the Mundys and Thomas from Trudna Farm, my grandfather, my uncle. Anyhow, they were a small band, but they were a band. And I remember the last time that he ever played, and that was in the Victory Parade after the First World War. Now, the horse establishment that Josiah George had, they had what they called a Jersey car, like a bus with no top to it, seats. You could see it quite a lot. And they were on that, playing from that, drawn around the village. And that was the last time they played, the Victory Parade from the First World War. Well, now that comes to the horse establishment that Josiah George had. He had two horse buses. One went Poldhu way, the other went Troon way. And when they got to those two steep hills, you had to get out and walk. Too much for the horses to pull. But they went twice a week, Wednesday and Saturdays. Then, of course, he had landaus, wagonettes for weddings, and going to fetch visitors or drive them somewhere, jingles. And, of course, he had a horse-drawn hearse. And that had 6 black plumes on it. I can remember it. Yes. Of course, when the motors came in, that was all done away with. And the horses went, except what they kept for the farm. Because Corroger Farm belonged to him. And the horses were stabled down there. And where, what they now term the forge, down by the horses were stabled there, and some of the vehicles. And of course were the off licenses. Anyhow, so that was that. The other thing is, of course, when I was a boy, was the thrashing machines. Big steam things going 5 miles an hour, and how they got in some of the gateways was amazing. But they did, and of course now it's all combine. Those days are gone. The hay lift which the horse used to lift, hay, all those are all gone. But unfortunately, we've got no record to show these things. But anyhow, so now there's just one other little thing I would like to go on about. It's the local personalities. There was a man called Britannia, Ned Britannia. He lived up at Britannic in Mount Cottage there. There's 2 cottages in one. Eventually he came and lived down at the Flowder. Those 3 there, the middle one. He was, as far as I know, he was never married. He never had a woman living with him anyhow. But he was a queer sort of fellow, though. And he had a trick of saying almost every time he spoke, "Yes, mister. No, mister." Anyhow, he would come up Saturday nights from Prudanic and have his beer, and always a little bit more than what he should have. And it was electioneering time, and the main subject on the election program was the education bill. And they came out from the old inn, which closed at 9 o'clock in those days. And Ned was worse for drink. And when he got outside, up in the church tower, there was an owl. An owl was hooting, hoo, hoo. And Ned, of course, being in his condition, yes, mister, how about the education bill, mister? Hoo, hoo. All right, mister, how about the education bill? Hoo, hoo. He lost his temper and he said, to hell with you, mister. Anyhow, and another time, Britannia was in Helston and he started walking home. And he got out coming between Meanlay and the turning going down to Morgan, there. Stopped to light his pipe, wind was blowing, turned around, the trap come on. Like a left, mister. Yes, he said, thank you. Jumped in, of course forgot he'd turned around. Went down, when he got inside, what are they lights there, mister? He goes, Helston. Helston? He said, I don't want to go Helston, I want to go Mullion. Anyhow, that was the type of man he was. And then, of course, Tommy Trezise, you knew him.
Yes.
Ruby Martin's father.
Yeah.
He was a dry customer, very dry. And he was down at Poldhu Beach with his stick amongst the dry seaweed there. He used to walk down like something to do. And some visitors came up to him and said, excuse me, have you lost something? Yes, ma'am, he said. I lost a sixpence here 40 years ago. I'm still looking for it. But I'll tell you another one now. Someone asked Tommy how his brother was, Billy Trezise, and he farmed a small holding down at Lamprey.
Right, yes.
And they didn't get on very well. Tommy didn't like Willie and Billy didn't like Tommy. They were right opposites, because Tommy was happy-go-lucky and liked his pint of beer, Billy didn't. Anyhow, someone asked him this down at the old inn one night. Of course, Tommy, quick-fitting thing, made up a story quick as lightning. He said, you know, I had a dream the other night. You did, yes. Dreamt, he said, I went to the gates of heaven. When I got there, Peter was at the gate and he asked who I wanted to see. I said, my brother Peter, brother Billy. Billy Trezise. Now I don't remember the names. Peter said, I'll go and have a look. Went in, Peter come back. No, can't find any Billy Trezise here. Where did he come from? Curie. Oh, Peter said, that's finished it. Nobody had been from Curie here for 40 years. Now that was Thomas Trezise.
Lovely.
But anyhow, we used to have fairs here when we was Joneses. The roundabouts turn by handle and coconut shies and swing boats. Nothing very big, but they came nearly every year up in the field up there.
Which field is that?
And of course, one great personality was Gent George. He was a personality, but he was a well-read man. He was clever. He had brains, and he could talk on almost. And he'd talk on the Bible with you, mister, and he would talk as well as anyone. Yes. But he knew what he was talking about. But he was a character. Yes. So, anyhow, then there was, who was the other one I wanted to talk about? Oh, Harry the postman, Basil, but he was always happy-go-lucky. Put his hand up. Everybody loved old Harry carrying post. Of course, there used to be copper mining up at Bro Farm.
Yes.
Not very big, no big stacks built or nothing, but they dug from, and the biggest piece of natural copper in this country is now in the Science Museum, came from Bro Farm. Yes. Down at Paul Dew, where the car park is, there used to be a pumping station there, which pumped water for Marconi, because they had 3 big boilers, and they pumped water up into an enormous sunken reservoir. There was a wall about that high, that's all, just all the way around it, but it was, put this room into it 4 times, I expect. But 3 boilers, and that's what kept the... Anyhow, my father went down there one day, bad weather, went down to see if everything was all right. And Rodney Lugg's father was pumping. And they went inside, blowing a gale, enormous sea running. And they were looking out of the window, and my father said, "Look, Cass," and there was a wave coming, enormous wave, and it didn't break until it got to the bridge, and it went up. When it broke, they slipped and looked up the other end, and it ran up Paldue Moors out of sight. Yeah. So you never know what's happening in Mullion. Of course, we used to have French onion men here selling onions on their shoulders with a rod. They would come up out of a van and go round carrying, but later they
We're back in business.
I tell you about the French onion.
Yes, that's right.
Now, today, a farmer wants to take cattle to the market. He hires a lorry.
Yes.
But when I was a boy, there was no lorries. And I can remember Knowles, Pradanic Farm, driving as many as 20 cattle to Helston Market. His son, 2 workmen, and a dog.
Yes.
And of course, they couldn't do that today with traffic. But that's what happened. And all those cattle would be sold. They'd come back, wouldn't have to bring any back. So that was farming in those days.
Be a day's work, that. Be a day's work to drive them into Helston, wouldn't it? Take some time.
Yeah. Mind you, it was a lovely sight to see these bullocks. Yes. And of course, when I was a kid, not like today, they've got mountain bikes, they've got motorbikes, they've got surfboards, wetsuits. What we had was iron hoops with a drill, and if we broke it, we had got blacks in the shop to have it mended. Marbles, tops. My grandfather used to make tops for us kids, and we'd have play in the schoolyard with them. And we had 2 types of tops. One would have a screw, the other would have a nail. You see, now to spin your top, you had a circle, and you had to get out of it. If you stopped in it, you had to put it in the middle of the circle, and somebody had to knock you out of that little circle. Well, of course, use the screw on, and he would go around, and sometimes they would go in and fall in, and then you put them in. If you had yours in there, and I'd a bit up against you, take a nail one, and I'd split yours in half. if I hit it, you didn't always hit it, but that was the idea. Try and split it. But anyway, that's what happens. No, but as I say, nowadays it's all made for them, and they aren't asked to along. Now, I did refer to filming at Cove, but we had one very interesting one which included Mullion people in it, and that was Poland Negri, the American actress, and the Dutch actor Hans Raymond. He was a big fellow, 6'4", and they were lovers in the film. But they came down here to have the cottage in the church, and the wedding was there. And where the end one of my row, Ida Nichols's grandmother lived there with her aunt, Granny Warren, and she was to be the mother of the bride, and Rover George, that lived down in the thatched cottages which are gone, and that would be Ben George's grandfather. He was to be the father of the bride. Anyhow, they filmed it, coming out of the cottage, going into the church, and coming out again, and there was two boys. Ginger was one, and I think Douglas Tonkin was the other. They were something, I don't know, but they filmed it there, but we never saw the film. But it was lovely to see it all done, and they were the Mullion people in it. Yes.
Well, you got some memories, haven't you? You got a lot of memories.
Yes. I can't think. I might have. Don't think so.
And there was a lot of sport in Mullion.
I can remember the first bus coming in.
Oh yes.
Hard tires. Driven by a fellow called Bob Dunn.
What year would that have been?
Oh, just after the first, not long after the First War, not a great while after. Yes. Of course, the old Coast Guards, they had two lookouts.
Yes.
One by the hotel, the old one, I don't know if you remember that one I explained.
Yes,
and one up at Pradamic.
Yes.
But the one at Cove Hotel was manned night and day. By night, rather. Not at day, unless it was stormy. But the one at Pradamic was manned at night only. And, torches weren't very good in those days. And the way that they would walk from there, they'd walk straight up there. They had big white stones painted white, all the way up on the cliff. And that's how they found their way. We used to have films when we come around here, when I was a boy. A man from Penzance called Will Newt.
Right.
And all we had was either Buster Keaton or Charlie Chaplin. And it was all lined, like, you would say, that's raining these days, but of course it wasn't, it was a worn film.
So where did they hold those? Where did they show them?
In the reading room.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. That was the reading room before it became the British Legion.
Yes.
And you had one daily paper, Morning News. On the weekend, the West Britain. No ladies allowed in there. No, not to read the papers. Yes.
You've lived in Mullion all your life?
All my life. I was born up behind where a Miss Thompson lives now. You know what we used to term Willow Cottage, opposite down Willow End. Toolie Gilbert lives down there. But there's a one little bungalow a cottage in between there. Mrs. Blair was there. But that's where I was born. Yes. Yeah.
Who was your school teachers?
Mr. Perry, when he went to the war, Mr. Perry, Miss Treglone, Freddie Tresize's mother, and Miss Penrose. Miss Treglone taught me as an infant. Then I moved up into the second classroom, Miss Penrose, and then into Mr. Perry. But when Mr. Perry went to the war, and Miss Freeman came here, there were two sisters, and they rented Pembroke House. The one sister did the cooking, looking after them, and the other one was the school teacher. But of course, the boys took advantage of her, you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you remember, were there any particular songs sung in Mullion or about Mullion? Any particular songs sung about Mullion or in Mullion?
Well, yes, there is. Well, I say yes, there is. Because we had to make our own entertainment. Now, Mrs. Shepherd at the Flower Farm, she was very good.
Yeah.
She got up operettas or musical-like songs, you know. I remember her once giving a concert with the Messiah. She got the local stuff. Anyhow, my brother organised what was known as Mullion Players. And of course, ours was variety. Good for a laugh, you know. There was no serious murders or nothing like that. The odd voice or two we get. But you see, during the war we gave concerts for the Welcome Home Fund, you see. And you remember the song, there was beer in the quartermaster store. We made up one or two. Hamill Mitchell, he was the captains, and there's pitch to stick old Captain Mitch in the stores. We sang it, you know. And Willie Minns, that's David's father. There's pins, we're sticking Sergeant Minns. And there's specs to be borne by Corporal X. Anyhow, all those. But we did make up my brother started it. He made up the song of Mullion. 5 verses. Just 5, isn't it? Yes. Here's a song of Mullion Town, a village on the Cornish coast of great renown. Mullion is a lovely spot, but the one-way traffic is a lot of rot. Lydon's ice cream cools your lips. You warm your tummy up with Ida's chips. Now, some things actually, nearly every verse is something that happened, which extended and made fun of. Anyhow, at Mullion Cove, you watch the waves, while couples canoodle in the caves. If walk along the pier you must, please give a penny to the National Trust. Our girls are cute, they wear nice clothes, but they'd rather have a sailor from Godrose. Now Mullion has a fire brigade. They put the fires out with lemonade. The captain has a lovely crew, Bill Baughan, Bill Trice and Duncan Ballou. The ladder fell down on the lot. Let Bill Trice on the chimney pot. Now Mullion has a football team. They've all got knobby knees, oh what a scream. Gordon Chaplin clips the dibs. You have to pay a tanner to have a look at ribs. Sweeney Todd tells them what to do. The biggest licking yet, 11 to 2. Those are the verses my brother made up. You see, they did go to the Wheel Inn. Bill Trice was up and the ladder fell down.
Really?
Left him up there.
Beautiful.
See?
Yeah.
And They went to Weybridge and got licked 11-2.
Really?
See? Anyhow, when anything happened, years after my brother died, I was up in Mounts Bay having a drink. Dick Gilbert was there, and a lot of the fishermen. And Dick said, "Can you make up a verse about them? When they come in from sea, they all sit down in front of the cellar there and watch all the young ladies going up and down. Down by the cellar every day, the fishermen watch folk pass their way. But when the blondes and brunettes pass by, Pard and Jack just wink their eye. Eddie says this, Glenn says that, but hopeful Vic says, I'm too fat."
Yeah, that's great. Pard Monday and Eddie Monday. Yeah.
They were launching the boat one day, and Pard got pushed in the sea. Like, fella slipped into Pard and pushed him in. At Mullion Cove, just near the cave, someone saw a seal swimming in the wave. They had high hopes they might catch it too and send it up to the London Zoo. But their hopes were dashed so hard it wasn't a seal. Someone pushed it in Pard.
Yeah.
Well then, one August month, they had to pull all the boats up. No storm got up in August month. Didn't expect it, see. There's no warning. But when it come to pull them up, there was only 3 fishermen to do it. Glenn and Jack and Herbie Gilbert,
Yeah.
At Mullion Cove one August night, they pulled the boats. It was midnight. To pull them up, there was only 3. Glenn and Jack and Big Herbie. The others, they were nowhere near. They were down Porthallow drinking beer. Anyhow, that's that one. Now, someone said make one up about the parish council. I said, all right. Now, Mullion Parish Council is new. There isn't much good that they can do. One thing's certain, Scotty Ireland will shout of things that he really knows nothing about. There's Hendy, Freeman, Bill Roberts too. What a bloomin' lousy crew.
Lovely. Gathered that.
I had a county election held in May. Mullion had an exciting day. Farquhar said he was going to win. At the end of the day, it was Johnny to win. Poor old Bubbles was on the floor. All she bawled was 44.
Bubbles. Oh, golly.
Oh, there was a number, quite a lot of them,
Yes.
Wally Bray, Wally Bray.
Yes.
Of course, Wally did this, and Wally hadn't done that. He was telling us one night, a crowd of us together, been down rock fishing. Oh, I had a monster on the line. Broke the rod. Oh, bad luck. Someone caught my eye on me. Before I went out that night, before I left the inn that night, I made a verse up. Fishing from the rocks one summer day, Wally Cush saw a shark in Mullion Bay. Everything was going fine when he hooked this monster on his line. But alas, it broke his rod. But it wasn't a shark, it was a 2-pound cod. Wally Casley, you knew Wally.
Yes, I did.
Taking up floorboard one night, down in the council house, put chisel in the water pipe, split the pipe. Someone told me of it. Taking up a floorboard one summer night, Wally Casley put the chisel in the water pipe. The water through the ceiling, it poured down. The whole darn family were nearly drowned. He should have turned the water off at the mains. But what do you expect? He's got no brains. And then Billy Wee,
Yes.
he came in there, Mounts Bay one day with a new jacket on. Cool. Hello, Bill, what? Come up on the pool, have you? No, he said, the bloomin' kids burnt mine. Hey, what do you mean, burnt 'em? Oh, they burnt 'em. So, to St. Mellon's Terrace went the fire brigade. They went to Audrey Williams' aid. When they arrived, there was a lot of smoke. The kids had burnt Billy Wee's best coat. Now, poor chap, he's quite forlorn, nearly as bare as the day he was born. What? Audrey went out,
Yeah.
and she'd been ironing. Left the iron, then left it on. And of course, the kids burnt Bill's coat.
Yeah. So you made up verses about most events and most people.
Eh?
You made up verses about most of the events
Yes.
and most people.
Well, someone said to me, we had a ladies keep fit. Better get the ladies in it. Well, I'll try. In Mullion, we have keep fit too. They can show Eileen Fowler a thing or two. When they bend, they are all shapes, just like Bertram Mills's apes. From behind, in their dark pants, they look like Chipperfield's elephants. John Freeman, they used to love it because they had the nuts bays.
Yeah.
And they would shout, come on Sam, let's have the Mullion song.
Yeah.
Because I used to sing it then. And they would join in the refrain. I haven't given to the last verse, so I'll tell you the last verse. They've got a refrain to it. Anyhow, they loved it. And they've been trying and trying to get something of me, and they can't. I don't know why, but, well, of course, I don't tell them any secrets. But I thought, I'll have you one day. And that summer, I was standing at my door. April came out running. Have you seen John? I said, no, I haven't seen him. Why? Anything wrong? Oh, some people particularly want to see him. I can't find him anywhere. Oh, I said, you've been up the village. She said, no, I'm going. She went up the village. Come back. No, can't find him. Anyhow, left it at that.
Yeah.
Eventually. So I thought, right, I got you now. Mullion village one Friday morn. April Freeman was quite forlorn. Her husband John could not be found. Was he murdered or had he drowned? The people in Mullion were up in fear till they found him in Mounts Bay drinking beer.
Good old John.
Oh, there's lots of other ones, you know.
Yeah.
But of course, I made up about Roy, but I've got it on paper.
Yes.
But of course, Roy doesn't like me, and his wife likes me even less. So, but mind you, I mentioned no names in it.
Yes.
But whether she could add me up for it, I don't think she could.
Yeah.
You know the episode of the floral dance with Roy? He wasn't asked to dance in the flora.
No, I didn't know that.
Oh yes.
Ah, right.
Oh, we kicked up a fuss about it. It's in the press. Photographs in the press.
Right.
There's a man in Mullion who's in a trance. He hasn't been asked to the floral dance, but there's still two things on which he is keen. One is an OBE from the Queen. The other's one we all can see. It's This Is Your Life on ITV.
Very good.
Well, then he gave a chain of office.
Yes.
Well, he was chairman at the time. Anyhow, there's a man in Mullion, it would seem. He's very much like General Amin. He loves authority, power and fame. That's why he's given the council a chain. But it will not be treasure trove. It's one from the toilets at Mullion Cove. Because at the same time he was kicking up a fuss because the toilets weren't touched. Yeah, yeah.
You got some memory.
There's one or two other ones, but once I get start, I'm all right.
Yeah, yeah.
But I've got them written down home. Anyhow.
So you used to sing this, did you? Or you'd tell it?
Yes. Yeah. I used to sing it to a well-known light tune. It was, you know. And of course, the last verse my brother wrote. You've heard our song of Mullion Town, a village on the Cornish coast of great renown. Hotels, restaurants, golf and pub, not forgetting the Gay 90 Club. Liberal, Labour, Tories too, won the election quite a to-do. It's all over now, and we are friends. And this is how the song of Mullion ends.
Oh, lovely. Yeah. Beautiful.
Now.
So what tune did you sing that to?
I haven't got a very good voice. Here's a song of Mullion Town, a village on the Cornish coast of great renown. Mullion is a lovely spot, but the one-way traffic is a lot of rot. Leyden's ice cream cools your lips, you warm your tummy up with Hyda's chips. Oh, it is sublime to sing a song of Mullion all in rhyme. After Timberley. You've got it there now, I expect.
Yeah, that's lovely. Do you want to hear that a minute?
No,
That's
anyhow,
marvellous.
that's what it goes to. Right?
Yeah. So you must have made up a few verses.
Eh?
You must have made up a lot of verses in your time.
Over 80 altogether.
Really?
Yes. So, some. When one or two of them died, one of the first fishermen died, I said, no, you can't. Look, he said, that's the way he would want it.
Yeah.
Because he enjoyed it.
Yeah.
So, anyhow, I got them, most of them written down. There's one or two not so important ones.
Yes.
But,
and you managed to get John Freeman in the end?
I got him in the end. Yeah. I had little Ben George, because he used to play pool with Russian billiards with April, but I've forgotten that one. Well, it wasn't, it didn't mean so much as some of the others. Yeah.
That's really good. Yes, and you give talks around, do you?
I'm giving, I've given two on the history of Mullion Church, because that's enormous history.
Yes.
It's most intriguing.
Yes.
And of course I've given it to individuals as well, but given a talk publicly, twice I did that. Then I gave a talk up to the Evergreen, which your father heard. And then I gave one up to the Age Concern of 3 weeks to go, but not quite so full as this. And I've got to give it to the Old Cornwall Society in December.
Right, lovely. Oh, they'll enjoy that. You've got a lot of information up here, haven't you? It's important that you share it.
There's little, That's why I don't mind lending my photographs. I say to them, you're welcome to them, but look after them. See?
Yes.
And I lent the woman up to the chemist shop.
Yes.
She had 7 of mine.
Yes.
She brought them back last week. Delighted.
Yes.
I said, you've got the pleasure now as well as me.
Yes.
You see? And what you know now, you didn't know till I came here.
That's right.
Well, why not you enjoy it? I don't mind. I tell anybody want to know anything? Yes. And they can borrow my photographs.
Yes.
Because when I'm gone, let somebody else enjoy it. Yeah.
Could do with a place in Mullion to show these things off. Could do with a place in Mullion to show these things off, photographs and everything.
Well, they should do. Look, Mullion can raise money for anything. Why can't they raise money and get these photographs enlarged, like the ones that are up in that shop window? Don't want a frame with them, not pass-partout frame, and have them, and we could have them put somewhere where people can walk in, open them up once a day and see them there.
Yeah.
You see?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, you've known a few characters. You've known a few characters.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, it's been very good of you to come down and talk to me. Really good of
Pleasure,
you.
boy.
Very good.
When you come down again, if I've got any other photographs.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes you'd be surprised. Just one thing that cropped up now, which happened in 1927.
Yes.
July the 12th, I don't know if I told you or not. July the 12th, 1927, we had hailstones as big as golf balls. The sky went black like night. Opened up and down they came. And they were bigger than golf balls, some of them. Yeah. Never saw anything like it in your life. Yeah. And that was in August month.
Yeah. 70 years ago, nearly that.
Yeah. And the worst thunderstorm, whatever I remember, I was about 18. And that was August bank holiday. Yeah. And it struck the roof of my house and took 3 rows of slate off. And dropped down, this thunderbolt dropped down, and broke in small pieces in our yard. And you could smell the brimstone, boy.
Amazing.
And it was the only time I ever saw my father scared. My father wasn't scared. Yeah. I'd say, if tonight when I go to bed, thunder and lightning,
Yes.
I don't go to bed, I sit down in the chair and watch it.
Do you?
Yes.
Yeah.
Love the
Excited. Yeah. Yeah. I love the weather. I've been out this morning early. I've been on the cliffs down Mullion Cove to Kynance.
Yeah.
8 o'clock this morning.
Yeah.
Seas are rolling in.
I walked the kindness before breakfast.
Yeah.
In June month.
Yeah.
I had a red setter dog. And I had the day off. And I set the alarm for 4 o'clock.
Yeah.
I got out, made myself a cup of tea and a slice of bread and butter. I said to the dog, come on, boy. The red setter it was, and walked the cow up along the cliffs to Kynance. So when I got to Kynance, sat down on a rock on the top there, looked down there, loaded my pipe and had a smoke. Got up, said, come on, made for Mullion, then straight across the airfield.
Yes.
Of course, it was after the Second World War, and the Cold Rose hadn't taken it over then.
Yeah.
I came right across, and I was walking down, and when I came out by the Methodist Chapel Lane there, the 8:20 bus then came round.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes, you know the parish inside out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And you're still fit.
Tell you a story that come to me. Old man Harry, Freddie Harry, that's Irwin Hill's grandfather, was driving a donkey trap toward, I don't know whether he was coming back to Mullion or whether he was going to the Lizard, but one way or the other. And a Jersey car was passing with men on a day's outing.
Right.
And one of them looked over the side of the Jersey car and said to him, "Donkey for sale is a mister." If your mother can afford to keep two, yes.
Lovely story.
He was a witty man.
Yeah, lovely story.
Yeah. His brother, John Harry,
Yes.
he'd go out in the garden, say one word, put his hands out, and he'd be covered in sparrows. Head, arms, down around his feet, birds by the score. Yes.
Amazing.
And John Bryant's grandfather, on his mother's side, lived down in the thatched cottage down at Truman, the first thatched cottage. He could charm a snake by as easy as anything. Pick it up, charm it, marvelous. Yeah.
Yes, you can remember a few thousand people, really, can't you, over the years?
Oh, yes. Yes.
And you were very involved in the sport, weren't you? The sport of Mullion.
I played football for Mullion.
Yeah.
I was 21 before I started.
Really?
Walter Martin and I.
Yeah.
And they were driving us mad to turn out. Neither was particularly keen then. Bobby Nichols, Herbie Gilbert, I forget who they all were. And they were after us. So I said, what about it, Ted? Well, he said, if you'll play, I'll play. I said, all right. So we signed off. And we were put into the first team right away. The first match we played was up at Perranporth. We lost 1-0. And I said we were going to lose because when we came out from the dressing hotel or boarding house or something where we changed, we got funeral passed by. I said, oh, we've had it. Anyhow, played, and I played outside right. But if Billy Thomas, who was our goalkeeper, if he was sick or couldn't play, I had to go goal.
Right.
And I didn't mind it, but I preferred playing out on the wing.
Yes.
Because Albert Gilbert would tell you now, I was the fastest man in the team.
Yes.
I could run the 100 yards in just over 10 seconds.
Right.
Yeah, I used to run the 100 yards in 2:20.
Yeah.
Anyhow, I played it. In 1931-32, we won the Cornwall County League Western Division. That's from Truro down.
Yes.
We won it.
Yeah.
And we had to go up and play the final against St. Austell at St. Denis. And you know, within the first 10 minutes they scored. Ted Martin slipped at back and let the man through. And then they scored again not long after. Well, within 20 minutes they were 2 up. And we tugged away at them. Second half, okay, we penned them in their own half, all the time. And we scored one. I centred across, and I don't know whether it was Clifford edited it or whether young backs. Anyhow, 2-1, but 10 minutes to go, and
Couldn't get the second.
we couldn't get the second. But I got that medal along there with the Cornwall County, the coat of arms on that one.
Lovely.
Then we won the Helston Charity Cup, the Helston District League Cup, and the Percy Stevens Cup. We won those.
Yes. And you enjoyed your football?
Yes.
Yes. So I see that photograph you got, you're there in goal.
Yes.
On the photo.
But that was the second team, right?
Ah, yes.
Because what happened was, I thought it was time for me to give up because I was in the bakery.
Yes.
If I get crocked,
Yes.
Father was getting an age now.
Yeah.
wouldn't do. So I gave up playing first team. I said I'll play occasionally for the second team if you really want me. Well, I played 3 or 4 matches for them, and they come to me one evening, come down, we're a man short. If we win tonight, the cup's ours. I said, all right. I went down and played, and we won it. Where was I?
Yeah. Right, well, lovely been listening to you.
I used to play a bit of tennis, not a lot.
Yes, there was a courts just down the road, wasn't there?
Where the Women's Institute is.
Yeah.
Yeah, hard court. I used to play a bit there. But, of course, it's summertime, and I was busy in the bakery.
Certainly.
That's why I could never play cricket.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I didn't watch cricket as anything.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. I played golf a bit, but I was too late in life taking it up.
Right.
I'd over 50.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
right, Joe.
it's been lovely talking to you.
Okay.
I'll stop the tape.